Along the remote edges of highways, between states, and at the forgotten lines where one border meets another. There are roads that do not just connect towns, they connect the living to something far older. Fog settles along the pavement even when the skies are clear. Trees lean in as if trying to watch travelers. These border roads are haunted. They hold shadows of travelers who vanished. Figures that wait on the shoulders, just beyond the headlights. Eyes that appear in mirrors but are never yours. Some say the figures are memories of accidents, some say they are something darker. Cars stall inexplicably. Tires feel pulled. GPS devices fail. Travelers report a sudden chill as though the road itself breathes. Some have seen figures pacing in the fog, dark silhouettes that move against the light. Some have felt hands brush against their shoulders while no one is there. If you drove along a lonely border road and noticed a shadow in the distance that perfectly mirrored your movements, would you keep driving or stop and look to see who or what followed? Take a deep breath. The road stretches ahead. The shadows are waiting. Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight. Because the roads we are about to walk or drive are not meant for the faint of heart. Border roads are often overlooked, isolated, and quiet. But in their isolation, they have grown restless. These roads carry memories of travelers who disappeared without a trace. Car accidents that left only twisted metal. Fog that swallowed entire vehicles. Silhouettes that wait by the side of the road, lingering in the shadows. People driving these roads have felt a presence in the passenger seat, cold hands on the wheel, whispers urging them to turn. Some locals refuse to cross certain stretches after sunset. Some travelers claim they have been followed for miles by a figure that disappears as soon as the car headlights catch it. Others report seeing a shadow standing in the center of the road, only to vanish as the car approaches. These border roads are no longer just asphalt. They are liminal spaces, thresholds between the living and the shadows that cling to the edges of our world. If a shadow mirrored your movements on a border road, pacing in your headlights, would you stop to see what it is, or would you keep driving, hoping the darkness does not reach for you? Take a deep breath. The shadows are closer than you think. Mistvale Road winds through dense forests in Maine, a narrow stretch of asphalt that seems to vanish into fog long before the eye can follow. The air is heavy and damp, carrying the scent of wet pine and earth. Headlights cut a narrow path through the haze, illuminating only a few feet ahead, while the rest of the road fades into whiteness. Travelers report seeing a dark figure pacing along the edge of the asphalt. It moves slowly, deliberately, appearing at the limits of visibility. Headlights catch nothing but mist. When drivers try to focus, the shape seems to dissolve, leaving only empty fog and the faint impression of movement. The figure's form is shadowed, its features indistinct, yet its presence is unmistakable. Some say it shifts in height or posture as they watch, never standing still, always circling, always moving just at the border of the road. When drivers try to focus, the shape seems to dissolve, leaving only empty fog and the faint impression of movement. No one is seen during the day. During daylight hours, the road appears empty and quiet. Trees stand motionless along the edges. Yet the fog that creeps in at night seems to summon something that remains invisible in sunlight. Locals describe a feeling of unease, as though the road remembers every passerby who encounters the figure, storing the memory in the fog itself. Those who stop along Mistvale Road say the figure is gone. But footsteps follow them to the next intersection. The sound is subtle at first, a faint tapping or scuff along the asphalt. Then it grows clearer, keeping pace with the traveler as they move. The footsteps do not come from any visible source. The sound fades only after the traveler reaches the next junction, leaving a lingering sense of being watched. The fog shifts continuously, curling along the edges of the road and around the trees. It obscures details and creates illusions of movement. Shadows lengthen and contract, appearing in patterns that mimic human forms. Travelers report that the mist sometimes seems to stretch toward them, drawing attention to empty spaces, corners of the road, or the silhouettes of distant branches. The combination of movement and absence amplifies the sense of unease, creating the impression that someone is always nearby, just beyond sight. Roadside signs and guardrails appear warped in the mist. Familiar markers look different at night, angles distorted, distances misjudged. Even the sound of tires on asphalt is altered, muted by the fog, giving the sensation that the road itself absorbs motion. Small animals and birds avoid this stretch after dark. Only the figure, pacing along the edge, seems at home, moving silently as it traces the line between asphalt and fog. Some travelers report glimpses of the figure's face when the fog is thin, a fleeting shape that disappears when the eyes focus too closely. It may appear hunched, upright, or leaning slightly forward. The motion is constant, pacing in place or following the contour of the road. The figure's presence seems deliberate, as though it is aware of observers and maintains its distance just beyond reach. Those who stop their vehicles experience the most vivid encounters, hearing faint scuffing of shoes, feeling a shift in the air, and noticing the mist swirl unnaturally around their headlights. The footsteps that follow after the figure disappears are not random. They match the speed and cadence of the traveler. Sometimes they come in pairs, as if someone walks just behind, keeping time without ever revealing themselves. Other times, they seem to circle the vehicle before fading into the fog. No object or person is ever found. And the rustle of branches. Even experienced drivers describe a sensation of pressure along the shoulders or neck, as though something unseen accompanies them. The fog seems denser around this presence, swirling in eddies that do not respond to the wind. Light from headlights glints off moisture in the air, creating fleeting patterns that resemble movement. A shadow appears and disappears on the side of the road, always in the corner of vision, never fully present. Mistvale Road is narrow, curving sharply in places, and bordered by dense trees. The figure follows the edge of the road, never straying into the trees or onto the shoulder. Travelers who attempt to leave the centerline quickly feel the footsteps shift to match, keeping pace along the route. The effect is subtle, insistent, and impossible to ignore once noticed. The forest seems to participate in the experience. Branches bend slightly toward the road. Fog gathers in localized pockets. And the sound of wind through the trees changes pitch and direction. The figure's presence is magnified by the environment, creating a layered awareness of movement, sound, and space. Travelers describe an almost hypnotic effect, a draw toward observation, and an urge to continue forward despite unease. Fog blankets this stretch most nights. Travelers report seeing a dark figure pacing along the edge of the asphalt. No one is seen during the day. Headlights catch nothing but mist. Those who stop say the figure is gone, but footsteps follow them to the next intersection. Mistvale Road remains, a ribbon of asphalt suspended between forest and fog, carrying the presence of a figure that moves in silence, unseen yet undeniably there, pacing in the night for anyone who dares to drive its length. Hollow Ridge Border is a narrow road cutting through dense forests of Pennsylvania, a ribbon of asphalt winding between towering trees whose branches meet overhead to form a near-continuous canopy. Sunlight struggles to reach the pavement in the middle of the day, and at dusk, shadows stretch long across the lane, merging with the dark undergrowth on either side. Drivers entering the road immediately notice a change in the air, a stillness that feels watchful, as if the woods themselves are aware of every movement along the asphalt. The sensation begins subtly. A glance to the tree line catches something moving just out of focus, a figure that seems to step into the shadows only to vanish when fully observed. At first, drivers think it is an animal, perhaps a deer or a stray dog, but the shapes do not behave naturally. They dart across the road in sudden bursts, disappearing beneath tires without leaving a trace. The wheels do not make contact, yet the shadows bend and curve as if the road itself obeys them. Some who travel Hollow Ridge border report that the shadows mimic every turn of the wheel perfectly. A tight bend to the left is accompanied by a corresponding curve in a shadow that appears just ahead, falling across the pavement in rhythm with the vehicle's motion. A gentle swerve to avoid a pothole produces a sudden flicker. A reflection of the driver's movement mirrored in a dark shape that disappears into the forest. It is as though the road records the trajectory of every car, reproducing it in spectral form, always just out of reach. The woods themselves contribute to the disorientation. Branches arch over the lane, brushing lightly against vehicles when wind moves them, though often no wind can be felt. Leaves whisper faintly even in the still air. Sounds carry strangely in this area, the echo of tires, the low hum of engines, and the occasional rustle of movement within the forest combine to create a constant sense of presence. Drivers often describe the feeling of being followed, not by a person, but by something aware, persistent, and patient. At night, Hollow Ridge border transforms entirely. Headlights cut through darkness, illuminating segments of the road, but the shadows appear undiminished. Shapes slip between beams, darting across the asphalt and disappearing into the black. The forest becomes denser in perception, enclosing the vehicle on all sides. Drivers report a tightening in the chest, a subtle pressure on the shoulders as if someone leans close without touching. Occasional glimpses of shapes in peripheral vision vanish when the eyes attempt to focus on them directly, leaving only the dark road ahead. Fog is frequent in this area, rolling in from the low valleys on either side of the ridge. Visibility drops to a few yards, and the forest seems to draw closer. Shadows appear thicker here, more pronounced, and the sense of observation intensifies. The road curves, dips, and twists unnaturally, though maps show it to be a straightforward path. Tires seem heavier underfoot. The hum of the engine is accompanied by faint vibrations not attributable to the vehicle itself. Many drivers instinctively speed up, only to encounter more shadows mirroring their movement, matching acceleration, braking, and turning with eerie precision. Local legend speaks of Hollow Ridge border as a place where the boundary between the living and something else grows thin. The road has seen countless travelers, yet few speak of returning the same way. Some claim to have passed through the area without incident, while others describe subtle alterations in perception, a mile markers appearing in the wrong place, familiar turns shifting slightly, and the shadows moving independently of known sources. Reports vary, but a consistent element is the feeling of being watched, an awareness that never dissipates. The surrounding forest amplifies sound in unusual ways. Engine noise, tire friction, and even voices from a closed window carry farther than they should, bouncing off trunks and echoing between limbs. Yet the echoes sometimes return altered, warped, or layered with something else entirely, subtle whispers or rustlings just beyond comprehension. The effect is enough to unnerve drivers, to make a journey feel longer, more dangerous, and less predictable than it should. Those who attempt to record the road with cameras or dashcams often experience malfunctions. Footage shows shadows stretching, compressing, and appearing in places where no object exists. Images captured at night occasionally reveal shapes behind trees that are absent in daylight, or shadows crossing the road where the asphalt shows no indentation. Audio records pick up whispers, low hums, or rustles that cannot be attributed to wind or wildlife. The equipment itself sometimes behaves erratically, adding to the sensation that Hollow Ridge border does not allow observation without interference. Despite the unsettling phenomena, some travelers feel compelled to continue along the road. Curiosity, disbelief, and the desire to witness the unusual drive people forward. Those who turn back report that the road appears different on the return trip, curves sharper, shadows closer, and the sense of being followed intensifying. The journey through Hollow Ridge border is rarely forgotten, leaving an imprint on memory long after the asphalt ends and the dense forest recedes. Hollow ridge border is more than a road. It is a corridor of awareness. A stretch where shadows follow, mimic, and observe. Drivers report being watched, hearing movements and whispers. Seeing forms dart and disappear under tires that never make contact. The forest presses inward. The fog thickens. The senses heighten. Travelers who leave Hollow Ridge border rarely forget the sensation of observation, the unnatural movement of shadows, and the oppressive presence of the forest that surrounds it. The road winds through dense woods, and the boundaries between perception and reality blur. Shadows dart across the lanes. Eyes feel upon them. Shapes move beneath their vision. Drivers leave the forest behind, yet Hollow Ridge border lingers in memory, a stretch of road that watches and waits, patient and unyielding, ever present in the dark. Silent crossing stretches along a quiet stretch of road in Virginia, where trees press close to the asphalt and the pavement curves through shadows long before the sun sets. By day, the route is ordinary, lined with weathered signposts, worn guardrails, and the occasional farmhouse in the distance. By night, it becomes something else entirely. The road empties. No headlights pass, no engines hum, no tires crunch gravel. Figures appear along the roadside. They lean against signposts, casual in posture but impossibly still. Their clothing is dark, blending with the shadows at the edge of the road. Some wear hats, others coats that flutter without wind. The figures do not speak, do not move toward the road, but their presence is undeniable. Travelers who notice them often slow down, instinctively cautious. Those who approach find the figures vanish before contact, dissolving into the night air as though they were never there. A shadow lingers where they stood, but no imprint remains on the road. Travelers driving alone report sudden reflections in the rear view or side mirrors. A silhouette occupies the back seat, motionless. It does not move with the car, yet its gaze seems to follow, attentive and deliberate. The shape fades when looked at directly, vanishing entirely from the mirror, leaving only the empty seat behind. Some drivers claim the reflection reappears intermittently, in corners of the glass or at angles that defy the light, making it impossible to ignore. Breathing can be felt from the shadows. Some report it before seeing anything else. The sensation is subtle at first, a soft exhale brushing across the nape of the neck. Others feel it in their chest, shallow and rhythmic, matching their own heartbeat for a moment before growing irregular. The source is never visible. No window opens. No passenger leans forward. Yet the feeling persists, almost tangible, pressing close enough to evoke a primal caution. The road itself amplifies the tension. Guardrails rattle in the windless night. Trees sway though the air is still. Signs creak as though moved by invisible hands. Headlights catch shapes in the corners of vision, fleeting glimpses that vanish when attention shifts. The asphalt stretches endlessly, the lines reflecting faintly in the glare, creating illusions of movement that mimic the figures standing along the roadside. The environment itself seems aware, reacting to the presence of anyone traversing the highway after dark. Travelers report that even stopping does not remove the effect. Stepping from the car to inspect a figure or a shadow leads to immediate disappearance of all presence. The road, the signposts, and the trees seem to breathe in anticipation. Footsteps crunch along the gravel that are not made by the visitor. Shadows stretch and twist along the guardrails and shoulders, and the weight of unseen observation presses against the back and shoulders. The experience is disorienting, as though the road itself folds in on the person, holding them in a moment suspended between reality and something else. Mirrors return once again to unsettle the traveler. Rear-view glimpses sometimes reveal multiple silhouettes. Shadows that did not appear at the roadside, sitting silently, their presence passive but unmistakable. Some report sudden movement in the glass, leaning or shifting closer with no sound. Others notice subtle changes in light around the figure, as if the shadow absorbs the car's headlights rather than reflecting them. Any attempt to confront or address the presence results in immediate disappearance, leaving only emptiness and the sensation of being watched. The combination of sight, sound, and sensation creates a lingering unease. The roadside figures, the shifting mirrors, the subtle breathing, the moving shadows in the peripheral visiona all work together to overwhelm the senses. Travelers describe moments when the road seems longer, curving in unexpected ways, or the headlights dimming briefly as though the night itself responds to the presence of the living. Even the faintest movement along the shoulder catches attention, making it impossible to fully focus on the driving task. Locals warn against traveling silent crossing after dusk. They speak of travelers who never reach their destinations, or who arrive exhausted, pale, and shaken. Some recall vehicles returning with nothing wrong mechanically, yet the occupants describe experiences that cannot be explained. Doors open and close, seatbelts tighten, the mirrors reflect shapes that vanish, all without apparent cause. The road has a reputation for testing attention, awareness, and courage, revealing something that is otherwise unseen. Silent crossing endures, its asphalt slicing through fields and forests, bordered by signposts and guardrails. At night, it is deserted. Figures appear near the roadside, leaning against posts, vanishing when approached. Mirrors reflect silhouettes in the back seat. Travelers driving alone feel the presence of someone breathing from the shadows. The air itself seems to carry awareness, a silent watchfulness that persists regardless of human observation. Anyone who crosses it after dark moves through a landscape that is ordinary by day, yet alive with unseen motion by night. The experience is fleeting, disorienting, and unforgettable. Silent crossing waits patiently, stretching through the darkness. A place where the roadside figures, the vanishing silhouettes, and the breath from the shadows continue to watch in quiet vigilance. Ravenna's Edge Highway winds through the hills of West Virginia, a narrow two-lane road that twists and dips between dense forests. The asphalt bears the scars of countless accidents, some fresh, others long faded into the cracks and patches that mark the pavement. Locals speak of the highway in hushed tones, warning travelers of the stretch where the trees press close and shadows stretch across the lanes even in full daylight. Dusk brings the sharpest change, when the road seems to shift and the air grows heavier, pregnant with something unseen. As the sun dips behind the hills, black shapes appear along the asphalt. At first, they are indistinct, just dark forms standing still in the center of the road. Drivers report a sudden tension, the urge to brake or swerve. The shapes do not move until approached. When a vehicle veers to avoid them, the figures dissolve into mist, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Tires skid, heartbeats spike, and the highway stretches empty once more. But the memory of the shapes lingers, pressing into the mind long after the sighting. Walking the highway at night is another matter entirely. Those who do describe a silence that is not natural. The wind is muted. Leaves refuse to rustle. Every step seems to carry sound to the tree line, and sometimes, soft whispers respond. Names are called, almost human in tone, drifting across the darkened edge of the forest. The words are never clear, but the intonation matches the cadence of speech, pulling at the attention of the traveler, tugging at memory and fear alike. Some say the whispers follow them, shifting with each step, never directly behind but always within hearing. The trees along the highway seem to lean inward, their branches forming arcs over the lanes, casting elongated shadows that stretch across the asphalt. As if anchored to the darkness itself. And the shapes that emerge at dusk often appear at these spots, as if anchored to the darkness itself. Drivers describe sudden chills when passing these areas, an icy pressure along the spine or across the shoulders, like unseen fingers brushing past. Headlights catch the misty forms but never illuminate them fully. Rear-view mirrors seem to reflect shapes that are not present in the front view. The highway curves unexpectedly, dips seem sharper, and the road appears to narrow just enough to intensify the sense of danger. Vehicles may swerve instinctively, even when the highway is clear, responding to something more than sight, responding to presence. The black shapes themselves are ambiguous. Some witnesses insist they resemble human figures, though elongated and disproportionate, dark enough to swallow light. Others describe them as faceless, shapeless, like shadows given form by intention. They remain stationary until observed directly, and then, in response, they evaporate into mist or drift to the sides, merging with the darkness at the tree line. There is no pattern to their appearance beyond the time of day and the diminishing light. The whispers that follow pedestrians are equally mysterious. They are soft at first, indistinct, just the sensation of words forming in the air. As one continues, the names grow clearer, yet are never fully audible. The effect is disorienting. Travelers often report dizziness or a sense of being watched from the surrounding trees. Leaves rustle, shadows shift, and the highway seems to bend inward, funneling attention toward the tree line where the sound originates. The forest appears alive, breathing in sync with the footsteps of the walker, amplifying the sense of observation. Some claim to have touched the black shapes as they dissolved, their hands passing through mist that feels cool and damp. Others report that the whispers are almost physical, brushing against the ear, threading through hair, pressing against skin. The effect is cumulative. Panic rises easily. And instinct drives travelers off the highway or back toward the safety of headlights and asphalt visible in daylight. Ravenna's Edge Highway has become a repository for these experiences. Accidents, unexplained swerves, and missing travelers are recorded in local lore. Every stretch of curve and dip is remembered, every black shape sighting passed along as a warning. The mist, the shadows, and the whispers persist year after year, unaffected by maintenance crews or changes in weather. Even those who do not witness the figures directly report an unshakable tension when driving the road at dusk or walking it after dark. The highway itself seems to react to attention. Headlights, footsteps, and even the shifting of the wind influence what is seen and heard. The black shapes, the whispers, and the tree line form a cohesive presence, interacting with perception rather than existing independently. It is a space where memory and fear converge, where the road itself seems alive, aware, and observant. Ravenna's Edge Highway endures as a place where darkness and perception meet. Black shapes stand in the center of the road at dusk, dissolving when avoided. Whispers call names from the forest edge, following anyone who walks the highway at night. Shadows stretch across asphalt, branches bend inward, and the mist rises from low valleys. Visitors leave with the echo of observation, the pull of presence, and the memory of a highway that watches as much as it carries. A stretch of road where the ordinary and the unseen coexist in careful tension. Fog Hollow Pass twists through the dense forests of Oregon, a road carved into ridges and valleys that are often lost in mist. On many mornings, the fog rolls in so thick that the curves of the road disappear entirely, leaving only a narrow line of asphalt beneath tires. The world beyond the headlights vanishes, and the forest becomes a shadowed presence on both sides, silent and observing. Travelers describe the fog as unnaturally heavy, pressing against the vehicle and obscuring the boundaries between road and forest. Shadowy figures are reported pacing along the guardrails. They appear just beyond the edges of vision, dark shapes that move with measured steps, fading when headlights sweep over them. Some say they are people, others insist they are not. They do not speak. They do not react to attempts at recognition. Observers often notice a hand emerge from the mist, pale and reaching, pointing or grasping. The hand disappears as quickly as it appears, leaving the mind to question if it was ever there at all. Vehicles passing through Fog Hollow Pass sometimes encounter strange phenomena. Tires squeal as if brakes were applied, yet the pedal remains untouched. Steering wheels feel a subtle pull in one direction, the car leaning as though urged by an invisible force. The asphalt itself seems alive underfoot, responding to the approach of travelers with minor vibrations and unexpected feedback. Those who notice it report a chill in the air, a shift in perception, a feeling that the road is more than asphalt and guardrails. Voices echo from the woods lining the pass. They are faint, carried by wind or mist, but the source cannot be identified. Sometimes the voices mimic the traveler's speech, repeating questions or fragments of conversation. Other times they speak names that the visitor does not recognize. The sound moves between trees and along ridges, suggesting presence without form. Travelers report the voices layering, building into a chorus of whispered sentences that rise and fade, urging caution or drawing attention to unseen events. Fog Hollow Pass is littered with old signs, some broken or obscured by moss and undergrowth. Warning markers bend in the fog, leaning as though leaning toward or away from something invisible. The guardrails along the curves are dented and rusted in irregular patterns, creating shadows that shift in strange ways under headlights. Some marks appear recent, though no accidents have been reported at those locations for decades. Travelers often glance to the side and swear the railings have moved slightly, just enough to suggest someone pacing along them or testing the edges of the road. The mist itself seems to have volume and density beyond normal weather. It hugs vehicles and obscures distance so completely that the next curve can emerge with no warning. Shadows and shapes appear within it, vanishing when attention focuses directly on them. Small objects, sticks, and leaves seem to lift and drift through the fog without wind, tracing arcs that defy gravity and logic. Observers often describe the experience as being watched, measured, and followed, even when they are alone. Travelers report phenomena that challenge understanding of the physical world. Tires occasionally skid as if meeting slick surfaces, yet no moisture exists. Headlights catch reflections of forms behind the car that vanish when looked at directly. The hand that emerges from the mist sometimes drags across the surface of the guardrail, leaving wet marks or smudges that disappear shortly afterward. The fog is thicker near these disturbances, pressing close, as though responding to the presence of human movement. The pass has an eerie consistency. Those who enter often report similar sensations regardless of time, season, or direction of travel. Fog thickens in the same spots. Shadows appear in the same locations. The voices return at the same points along the route. The rope of the mist seems drawn to the curves, the bends, and the guardrails, suggesting a pattern. Travelers describe a sense of history embedded in the pass, as if the phenomena have repeated endlessly, guiding each journey in a subtle and deliberate way. Night amplifies the effect. Headlights struggle against the dense fog, illuminating only the faint outlines of trees and guardrails. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, sometimes appearing to step or shift in time with the Traveller's movements. Whispers rise from the forest and fog, more insistent than during the day, forming a low chorus that suggests urgency. The hand in the mist sometimes reaches directly toward the vehicle, moving in apparent coordination with the whispers and shadows. The effect is disorienting, compelling the observer to focus yet remain on guard. Fog Hollow Pass is not a location one returns to at will. Those who navigate it once often do not find the same curves, the same trees, or the same shapes on subsequent journeys. Responding to human presence while maintaining its mysteries. The hand reaches from mist. Whispers echo from the woods. The fog hides the curves, conceals the path, and observes all who travel through. Thick fog hides the curves of the road. Shadowy figures pace the guardrails. Sometimes a hand emerges from the mist, pointing, reaching. Tires squeal on dry asphalt though the brakes were untouched. Travelers report strange voices echoing from the woods. Fog Hollow Pass waits for those who wander too far, observing, measuring, and guiding each step along the hidden road. Darkwater Lane stretches through the lowlands of Louisiana, a narrow road lined with cypress trees that lean over the asphalt like watchful sentinels. The air is thick with humidity and the scent of swamp water, dense with the smell of earth and decaying vegetation. The road winds quietly through the shadows, narrowing as it approaches a small bridge that crosses a slow, dark river. The surface of the water is still, mirroring the branches above, and the mist from the swamp often drifts across the lane, softening the edges of reality. A small bridge along this road crosses the river. Its planks creak lightly under the weight of passing vehicles, and the wooden railings are weathered and darkened with age. Moss climbs along the beams, dripping faintly into the water below. At dusk, the bridge seems longer than it should, stretching across the river with an almost unnatural persistence. Drivers slow as they cross, sensing an odd stillness, a pause in time where the air grows heavier, and shadows deepen along the edges of the water. Locals say shadowy figures appear in the water's reflection. When vehicles approach the bridge, shapes form beneath the surface, dark and shifting. They are vague, blurred at the edges, moving in ways that defy the ripples of the river. Others swirl and drift, like smoke caught in water, leaving ripples that seem deliberate, like marks of intent. Some appear humanoid, elongated and indistinct, standing in the reflection as if waiting to cross themselves. Drivers report a sense of heaviness pressing on the car. The sensation begins subtly, a weight along the roof and doors, as though the vehicle itself is being held in place. Pedals feel stiffer, the steering lighter, and the air inside grows thick and oppressive. Some say the weight is uneven, pressing more heavily on the sides, as if something moves along the exterior of the car, unseen yet present. The effect intensifies as the vehicle reaches the midpoint of the bridge. Some passengers swear the shadows are climbing in from the sides. They catch glimpses out the windows, peripheral shapes that rise from the water's edge and move toward the car. Not fully formed, not entirely solid, but undeniably present. The effect is disorienting, a mixture of reflection, shadow, and perception that seems impossible to rationalize. The river itself is deceptively calm. Its surface reflects the sky, the trees, and the bridge in a perfect mirror. Yet the reflections distort slightly, bending and twisting with the movement of unseen shapes. Occasionally, small ripples appear, though the water is otherwise still. They follow the rhythm of the bridge and the vehicle, rising and falling in time with the tires. The reflections of the figures shift in these ripples, elongating or contracting, moving independently of the water's flow. The atmosphere on the bridge feels suspended. Sounds from the surrounding swamp are muted, as though absorbed by the air itself. The croak of frogs, the rustle of reeds, and the faint splash of fish vanish beneath a low hum, imperceptible yet constant. The mist clings to the sides of the bridge and the water's surface, curling around beams and railings. Every shadow, every reflection, and every subtle vibration becomes amplified, creating the impression that the bridge exists in a space outside ordinary time. The planks of the bridge groan under weight, and the wooden beams shiver slightly as if responding to the presence above and below. Some travelers describe hearing faint whispers, not words, but a low, undulating sound, like currents moving through the water. It seems to rise from the river, echoing along the bridge, surrounding the vehicle and passengers in a soundscape that is simultaneously intimate and alien. Footsteps are sometimes heard on the bridge, though no other travelers are present. They move along the planks with a rhythm that mirrors the vehicle, circling from end to end, yet never leaving visible evidence. The sound blends with the creaking of the boards, the rippling of the water, and the shifting mist, creating the impression that the bridge itself is alive, aware of every motion across its span. The shadows in the water seem to interact with each movement. As headlights sweep across the river, shapes respond. They twist, elongate, and bend toward the vehicle. Occasionally, reflections appear to step onto the bridge itself, though when passengers look, the planks remain empty. The effect is fleeting, a distortion of perception, yet undeniably tangible, leaving a lingering tension in the car long after crossing. Drivers who attempt to pause on the bridge feel the weight increase, pressing down on the roof and doors with greater intensity. The mist thickens around the vehicle, reducing visibility, and the reflections grow more defined, darker, and closer. The shadows seem to follow every movement, maintaining position along the sides and beneath the car. Some report a subtle vibration against the tires, as though the river itself communicates through the bridge, a pulse of awareness that cannot be ignored. As the vehicle exits the bridge, the air lightens gradually, the weight dissipates, and the shadows retreat into the water. Yet the memory of presence remains. Passengers describe a lingering sense that something continues to follow, footsteps echoing faintly along the lane until the next intersection. The river returns to its stillness, the reflections fading into normality. The mist thins, and the bridge resumes its quiet, waiting state. A small bridge along this road crosses a slow river. Locals say shadowy figures appear in the water's reflection. Drivers report a sense of heaviness pressing on the car. Some passengers swear the shadows are climbing in from the sides. Darkwater Lane waits silently for the night, its bridge suspended between mist and river, carrying the weight of unseen watchers and reflections that linger long after the headlights pass, a place where the ordinary world fades and perception bends beneath the fog and shadow of the swamp. Crosswind Border Road stretches across rural Texas, a twisting ribbon of asphalt cutting through open farmland. The air is still, heavy with heat or chill depending on the season, yet travelers describe a sensation of movement, a presence that seems to track their every turn. Shadows appear in the headlights at irregular intervals. At first they seem like animals, deer or foxes darting across the road. But they move unnaturally, too precise, too deliberate. Some shadows appear to walk backward, perfectly mirroring the car's motion in reverse, step for step. The effect is disorienting, a sense that the road itself has taken notice of the vehicle and adjusted the movement of something unseen. No footprints follow, no evidence remains on the pavement or shoulders. The shadows exist only in the light and in perception, fleeting yet undeniable. Drivers report sudden cold breezes from open windows, even when the air is completely still. The wind carries a chill that seeps into clothing and skin, brushing across the neck and shoulders without warning. It does not whistle, rustle, or carry debris. It is a sensation alone, present in a calm landscape where no weather should intrude. It is a sensation alone, present in a calm landscape where no weather should intrude. Some say it accompanies the shadows, as though the unseen presence needs to be felt in addition to being seen. Others feel it moments before a shadow appears, an anticipation of what will follow. The road is narrow, barely wide enough for two cars to pass in some sections. Trees and tall crops line the edges, casting long shadows that mingle with the moving shapes. At night, the darkness thickens, leaving the headlights as the sole source of vision. The road seems to extend endlessly, every curve hiding new shadows that appear without pattern. Drivers often notice that no matter how far they travel, the same shapes reappear at intervals, always in sync with the car, always watching, always present. Sound behaves strangely along Crosswind Border Road. Engine hums seem muffled or distorted. Tires on asphalt echo faintly, yet the road absorbs sound in unexpected ways. Leaves rustle, though no wind moves them. Occasionally, the air carries distant noises, the faint clink of metal or the soft shuffle of footsteps, which vanish when one attempts to locate the source. Even the hum of the engine feels augmented, amplified in the ears, heightening the sense of observation, of being measured, of being followed. Travelers report moments of vertigo, a disorientation that grows as the shadows appear and the cold breezes brush past. The road seems longer than it should, with curves that extend unnaturally and hills that rise and fall in ways inconsistent with memory or maps. Some drivers swear the headlights reveal features of the landscape that are not visible in daylight, shadows shifting and stretching, forming shapes that vanish when the car slows or turns. It is as though the road itself bends perception, guiding attention and influencing movement. The shadows sometimes cluster near roadside markers or fence posts. They pause, hover, then move in perfect coordination with the vehicle. Observers describe a subtle pressure in the air, a weight that presses inward. As though the shadows are conscious and responsive, reacting to movement and anticipating motion. Even when the vehicle stops, the sensation persists. The air charged with the presence of something just beyond the visible. The open fields amplify the sense of exposure. There are no nearby buildings to break the line of sight, no other travelers on the road. The isolation intensifies the experience, heightening awareness of every movement, every rustle, every flicker of light and shadow. Headlights carve through darkness, illuminating portions of the road and field, yet the shadows seem to emerge independently, as though from the dark itself. Their motion is deliberate, not chaotic, and always synchronized with the traveller's journey. Some who attempt to document the road with cameras or dashcams experience distortion. Video may show a shadow in one frame, then in another, impossibly aligned with a previous or future location. Audio recordings capture whispers, faint footsteps, or the hiss of wind where none exists. Images of the field sometimes reveal figures just at the edge of the beam, barely visible, shifting position between frames. Technology itself seems to behave differently on crosswind border road, capturing aspects of perception not fully grounded in reality. Travelers who complete the road describe a lingering impression. The shadows, the cold breeze, the synchronized movement of unseen presences, and the strange awareness of observation remain long after leaving. The road stretches endlessly in memory, the twists and turns, the hills and dips, the precise yet inexplicable phenomena imprinting a sense of unease and vigilance. The open farmland, the narrow asphalt, the trees, and markers all contribute to the feeling that every step and turn is watched, recorded, and responded to. Crosswind Border Road is not simply a stretch of pavement. It is a corridor of perception, a place where shadows appear in headlights. Walking backward in perfect coordination. And cold air moves through still windows. The road twists across farmland. And drivers feel observed, measured, and followed. The experience is disorienting. Subtle, and persistent. Leaving a lasting impression long after the journey ends. Shadows dart across the lanes, disappearing under tires that never touch. A cold breeze brushes past. Eyes feel upon the traveler. The road stretches ahead, twisting and watching, alive in its own way. And those who pass through Crosswind Border Road carry the memory, aware that the path is never truly empty. Whispering Pines Highway winds through dense forests in North Carolina, a two-lane road flanked on both sides by tall, towering pines. Their trunks rise straight and dark, needles interlacing above to form a canopy that blocks the sun even in daytime. By night, the highway is quiet, the asphalt stretching into darkness, lit only by headlights that cut narrow paths through the trees. The road is deserted, but the forest feels alive, aware of every vehicle and every step. Black figures emerge between the trees. They move along the shoulder, pacing slowly, almost rhythmically. Their forms are tall and slender, entirely black, like shadows cast without light. They appear between trunks or along the edge of the road, just outside the reach of headlights, sometimes stepping fully into the light for a brief instant. Drivers report glimpses of hands pressed against bark, fingers splayed, as if the figures are stretching against the trees. The texture of the bark is visible beneath them, the hands moving across it, then vanishing before anyone can approach. The hands moving across it, then vanishing before anyone can approach. The shadows interact with the vehicles in unsettling ways. Only to reappear in the mirrors. Side mirrors and rear-view reflections reveal silhouettes seated or standing behind, out of position, moving against the angle of perspective. The shapes never fully occupy the car, but their presence is undeniable. Drivers describe the sensation of being watched from the back seat, peripheral vision catching movement that disappears when looked at directly. The highway seems longer, darker, more endless, when the figures are present. The pines themselves seem to whisper. Wind moves through the needles, producing a soft, sibilant sound that rises and falls, carrying across the highway like a murmur. Some say it resembles human voices, repeating words or phrases that cannot be understood. Others hear it as a low, continuous hum, vibrating in the ears and chest. The noise shifts with the movement of the shadows, growing louder when they pace closer to the road, fading when they retreat into the forest. It is subtle at first, easy to dismiss. But it intensifies as vehicles pass slowly or stop, creating the impression that the forest is alive and aware. Travelers describe a pull in the air along the shoulder. Stepping out of the car, even for a moment, brings an immediate sensation of weight pressing against the chest, a heaviness in the limbs. The shadows respond, pausing, shifting, moving closer to the road as though they are aware of human presence. The hands on the tree seem to follow every movement, rising and lowering in perfect rhythm with a heartbeat. The forest breathes around them, a collective exhale of leaves and needles, reacting to the living. The road is deceptively simple. Lines stretch straight or curve gently, yet the presence of the pines and shadows alters perception. Distances feel distorted. Mile markers appear to move. Headlights reflect unevenly off wet or dry patches of asphalt. Shapes in the mirrors sometimes appear larger, closer than they should, then shrink again as the car moves. Travelers report feeling compelled to accelerate, to leave the area quickly, though the road ahead remains empty and quiet. Some see the shadows multiply. One figure becomes 2, 3, sometimes more, pacing in unison or independently along the trees. Their movements remain synchronized, yet irregular enough to cause unease. Drivers who attempt to slow or stop for a closer look find the figures vanish entirely, only to reappear in mirrors moments later, standing silently behind the rear view or along the side windows. The repetition creates a feeling of being followed, of being trapped in a loop, even as the vehicle continues along the highway. Branches snapping beneath feet, the rustle of leaves, the faint echo of voices all carry farther than they should. A small crack in the forest floor can sound like a branch breaking in the distance, producing echoes that confuse direction and distance. The forest seems to warp sound, heightening awareness, creating tension. Travelers speak of the combined effect: shadows pacing, whispers through needles, distorted reflections, and the sensation of eyes in the back seat. Local legends warn against traveling the highway at night. Residents say the figures are the spirits of those lost along the road, bound to the forest and the trees. Some claim the shadows appear to remind drivers of past accidents or moments of misfortune, while others suggest the forest tests curiosity and courage. Those who ignore warnings report feelings of disorientation, fear, and a sense of being followed long after leaving the area. Whispering Pines Highway endures, lined by the dark, towering pines. Black figures appear between the trees, pacing the shoulder in silence. Hands press against bark, visible in fleeting headlights. Shadows vanish and reappear in mirrors, unseen yet unmistakable. Travelers driving alone feel the presence of someone breathing from the darkness, watching, waiting, guiding them along the endless stretch of road. The highway stretches on, deserted at night, carrying its secrets in the movement of shadows and the rustle of needles. The forest listens, the pines whisper, and anyone passing through knows the sensation of being observed by something beyond the edge of sight. Moonlight Crossing stretches through the Nevada desert, a long and isolated road where the asphalt fades into sand at the edges and distant dunes rise like silent guardians. Few travelers ever drive this stretch, and those who do quickly realize it is not a route meant for comfort or haste. The desert holds its own rhythm at night, still and quiet, yet alive in subtle ways that are easy to miss. Stars hang low and bright, illuminating the dunes with pale light, casting shadows that move with an uncanny fluidity. Along the roadside, shapes appear. At first, they are indistinct, mere smudges against the curves of sand. But as the car approaches, the shadows gain definition. They vanish into darkness moments before contact. Yet when travelers glance in the mirrors, the figures remain. They linger there, reflected in glass, always following, always visible, even after the dune seems empty. The persistence is disorienting, a reminder that perception does not always align with reality. The desert air carries sound differently at night. Every movement, every footstep, resonates farther than expected. Travelers report hearing footsteps echoing behind the car. Soft at first, then increasing in clarity. Tires on the road make no additional noise, yet the steps persist. They match the cadence of the figures on the dunes. Quick, uneven, but impossible to locate. The sound feels present, close, and unerringly aware of movement. As though the desert itself is guiding the echoes toward each visitor. The road seems to stretch indefinitely. Horizons blur, and the dunes form shifting patterns that disorient. Travelers who stop or slow find it difficult to determine distance. The shadows shift in tandem, darting between mounds of sand, appearing to approach before retreating, always just beyond reach. Moonlight plays across the contours of the desert, emphasizing shapes and creating illusions that draw attention and divert it simultaneously. The landscape feels alive, attentive to movement, reacting to the presence of anyone who dares cross at night. Mirrors hold a strange power along Moonlight Crossing. Glances into the rearview reveal the shadows as they move, distinct and detailed, sometimes appearing closer than reality allows. They may sprint across the dunes or crouch at the base, yet the reflection remains steady. Even when turning the head to look directly at the desert, the forms vanish. Observers feel tension build in the chest, a sensation that someone or something is watching through the glass, measuring presence without being seen directly. The air carries more than sound. There is an energy to the desert, subtle, almost tangible. Sand shifts under the wind in ways that seem deliberate, forming patterns at the edges of vision. A faint shimmer may ripple across a dune, momentarily revealing movement that disappears before it can be examined. Travelers often sense a pull toward the shadows, an instinctive awareness that urges attention even while warning of danger. The sensation is both magnetic and repelling, compelling forward motion while demanding caution. The road itself reacts. Tires may skid unexpectedly on patches of sand that were previously stable. Engines may falter for no mechanical reason. Headlights illuminate the dunes and find empty space. Yet the reflections in mirrors tell a different story. Shadows sprint along the edges, retreat, and linger with precision. Moving in a rhythm synchronized with footsteps behind the vehicle. Those who pause report that the echoes continue, even when the car is still. Leaving the desert seemingly listening and responding to hesitation. Some travelers report the sensation of weight on their shoulders, a pressure that comes without wind or touch. The sand seems to rise slightly beneath tires or along the edges of the road, as if adjusting to presence. The moonlight casts long shadows that stretch unnaturally, forming shapes that are faintly humanoid. Whispering sounds occasionally accompany the footsteps, unintelligible yet insistent, threaded through the rustle of sand and the hiss of air across the dunes. Names may be called, faint and fleeting, leaving a lingering awareness that something or something is present even when unseen. The longer a traveler remains on Moonlight Crossing, the more pronounced the effect. Perception bends with time and motion. Shadows move in synchronization with reflections. Echoes continue even without movement. And the desert feels alive, aware of its visitors. The dunes shift subtly, the wind carries sounds that are not natural. And the moonlight illuminates forms that vanish when attention is given directly. Every observation, every step, every glance becomes a part of the rhythm. A record in the presence that inhabits the highway. Moonlight crossing endures as a stretch of road where the ordinary and the unseen coexist. Shadows appear on the dunes along the roadside. Shadows sprint when approached, yet remain in mirrors. Shadows sprint when approached, yet remain in mirrors. Footsteps echo behind travelers, present even when the desert is empty. The moon casts light across shapes that move in deliberate rhythm. Whispers weave through the air, carrying names and awareness. Broken guardrail road snakes along the steep slopes of the Colorado mountains, a winding path carved from rock and soil that seems impossibly narrow from above. Sections of the guardrails have collapsed entirely, leaving only twisted metal and splintered posts to mark the edge. Travelers report a sense of vertigo even when seated safely inside their vehicles, a feeling that the cliffs below are closer than they appear. The road itself is uneven, cracked, and littered with gravel that slides under tires, creating the sense of instability with every turn. Shadows appear where there is no solid ground. They cling to the edges of cliffs and hover over gaps where fallen guardrails leave voids. Drivers describe seeing figures in these shadows, thin and indistinct, sometimes stepping as if pacing along the precipice, other times suspended above it. The figures are human-shaped, yet their movement defies physics. Some appear to fall, stretching toward the canyon floor, only to vanish in midair. Others repeat the same motion in multiple locations along the road simultaneously, as if the presence is not bound by space or time. The air around Broken Guardrail Road carries a tension that travelers notice immediately. It is heavy, thick with the scent of pine and wet rock, yet charged with something unseen. Wind rises and falls unpredictably, gusts brushing vehicles in ways that suggest pressure rather than air movement. Headlights illuminate patches of road for only a few feet ahead, leaving darkness at the periphery where shapes emerge just beyond perception. Observers report a heightened awareness, the mind alert to movement, sound, and shadow even when nothing seems present. Some drivers have paused to investigate these phenomena, stepping out of their vehicles and peering over the cliff edges. They report seeing the figures vanish, leaving no trace on the rock or the air. Others claim that after stepping back into the car, they glance again to see the same figures pacing in entirely different locations along the road. The experience is unsettling, a constant sense of observation and repetition that is difficult to reconcile with reality. The guardrails themselves tell a story of collapse and decay. Splintered posts jut outward, metal twisted into angles that seem to point toward the abyss below. Some sections of rail sway with no wind, producing low creaks and groans that echo along the cliffside. The shadows sometimes move in sync with these sounds, stepping in time with the noise, heightening the impression that the road is alive, or at least aware of those who travel it. Fog and low clouds frequently descend upon Broken Guardrail Road, wrapping the cliffs and roadway in near-total whiteout conditions. In these moments, visibility drops to a few feet, and the shapes in the shadows become more pronounced. Drivers report seeing figures emerging from the mist, appearing suddenly on edges that were previously empty. The fog acts as a veil, concealing the gaps, yet revealing the spectral movement within it. Even when the sun returns and clears the fog, the memory of motion and the sense of observation linger. There are accounts of sound that accompany the visual anomalies. Stones shift as if stepped on, metal groans echo where nothing is disturbed, and the occasional scraping along rock walls suggests movement beyond human capability. Some drivers describe the sensation of being followed, the awareness of eyes tracking from above, yet no living creature is present. The combination of unstable terrain, collapsing guardrails, and spectral figures produces an environment that is both physically and psychologically unnerving. Local lore warns against traveling the road at night. Residents speak of those who have disappeared entirely, vehicles found abandoned at curves where the guardrails failed to protect. In some reports, the witnesses who vanished were last seen staring into shadows at the edges of the cliffs, their headlights illuminating figures pacing in the distance. When search parties investigate, the road appears unchanged, no tracks remain, and the shadows are gone. Only the twisted railings and sheer drops remain as testimony to the strange events. Travelers who make it through broken guardrail road describe the experience as lasting long after the journey ends. The sense of observation, the memory of figures falling and vanishing, and the unpredictability of movement along the cliffs linger in thought. Even in well-lit areas far from the mountains, some claim to see fleeting shapes in peripheral vision, or to hear soft echoes of footsteps where none exist. The road imprints itself on perception, blending fear, caution, and the inexplicable into a persistent awareness. A mountainous road with collapsed guardrails. Shadows appear where there is no solid ground. Drivers claim to see figures falling from cliffs, only to vanish mid-air. Others report the same figures pacing at multiple points at once. Fog, wind, and sound combine to produce the sensation that the pass itself is alive. Broken guardrail road remains, a treacherous path where reality bends and the mind struggles to reconcile what it observes with what should be possible. It waits for travelers, measuring each step, each glance, each heartbeat along its precarious curves. Deadfall border winds through narrow canyons in Arizona, a road carved into the red rock over decades of erosion and shifting desert winds. The asphalt is cracked and worn, flanked by steep canyon walls that rise abruptly on either side. The cliffs absorb light, casting long shadows that stretch across the road and seem to move with the sun. Even during the day, the air feels heavier here, carrying the dry scent of stone and sand, tinged with a faint, almost metallic undertone. Shadows emerge from the walls. They are subtle at first, flickers along the edges of vision, shapes that dissolve when looked at directly. Some appear humanoid, elongated and distorted by the canyon light. Others stretch in ways that defy anatomy, slithering along crevices or climbing up ridges that should be impossible to scale. Drivers report catching these movements from the corners of their eyes, fleeting glimpses that vanish when the mind tries to focus on them. Some drivers feel a pressure in the seat as if someone is sitting behind them. It is light at first, a subtle weight pressing along the fabric or leather, enough to make the presence felt without seeing it. The sensation can increase, settling heavier with each curve in the road, accompanying the driver through the canyon's bends. Seatbelts feel slightly tighter as if pulled by an unseen hand. Occasionally, a chill brushes across the neck or shoulders, though no window is open, and the air inside the vehicle remains still. Whispers come from vents, mirrors, and the rearview reflection. The whispers are soft at first, almost imperceptible, rising and falling in rhythm with the driver's breathing. Words cannot be distinguished, but the tone carries urgency and insistence. The mirrors seem to flicker with movement not present outside the car, reflections shifting subtly, bending in ways that cannot be explained. The vents emit faint puffs of cold air, accompanying the whispering as though carrying it from some hidden source. The canyon walls themselves seem to lean closer as the vehicle moves forward. Narrow gaps between cliffs create alternating shadows. And sunlight cutting through illuminates dust and sand in the air, creating a haze that distorts distance. Drivers report that the shadows lengthen unnaturally as they pass, creating the sense that something follows in stride, mimicking speed and movement without leaving a visible form. Deadfall border curves sharply, the asphalt uneven in places, forcing careful navigation. Every bend brings a new perception, new shadows, new sensations. The pressure in the seat grows slightly as vehicles accelerate along the straight stretches, easing only when slowing. Whispers intensify near the hairpin turns, seeming to echo from multiple directions at once, rising from the vents, the rearview mirror, and the canyon walls. Sometimes the shadows appear to detach from the rock entirely. flickering across the pavement, lingering along the edges of the car. The air grows colder in these moments, chilling the skin even with windows closed. Light from headlights stretches across walls and boulders, revealing shapes that were previously invisible, yet no figure stands fully formed. The combination of movement, shadow, and perception creates a feeling of being observed, followed, and measured. The road narrows at points where rockslides have partially blocked the path. Loose stones rattle under tires, yet the sound is amplified strangely, echoing back with subtle variations. Whispers rise with these echoes, weaving around the vehicle, creating an auditory presence that seems to anticipate each movement. Even when drivers pause at a bend or a clearing, the sensation of another presence remains, pressing close, unseen but undeniable. Rear-view reflections distort unnaturally as vehicles move through the canyon. Objects seem to elongate or bend. Drivers report glimpsing figures leaning along the cliffs or standing just behind the car, vanishing when turning to confirm. The mirrors echo shadows, multiplying them, giving the sense that more than one presence occupies the space simultaneously. Combined with the whispers and the shifting pressure, the effect is disorienting, yet compelling, drawing attention forward along the road. Deadfall border is narrow, often allowing only a single lane of travel. The canyon walls rise abruptly, creating tunnels of stone that twist light and shadow. The air in these corridors feels thicker, heavier. Sounds of tires, wind, and passing vehicles are muffled and altered, creating a sense that the canyon itself is alive, interacting with travelers, shifting perception, and guiding attention. Creating a sense that the canyon itself is alive, interacting with travelers, shifting perception, and guiding attention. The final stretch of the canyon opens briefly into a clearing. Yet even here the shadows linger. The pressure in the seat recedes only slightly. Whispers fade but remain audible. And reflections in the rear view seem to linger, delayed, as if reluctant to leave. Drivers describe a sensation of crossing into another space. A boundary between the ordinary road and something that exists alongside it. Only perceptible to those traveling through the canyon at night. The road winds through canyons. Shadows emerge from the walls. Some drivers feel a pressure in the seat as if someone is sitting behind them. Whispers come from vents, mirrors, and the rear-view reflection. Those who traverse Deadfall Border do not travel alone. The canyon, shadows, and whispers accompany every curve, every bend, every step along the asphalt. Creating a passage where perception bends, presence lingers, and the road itself seems alive. Frostvale Road winds through the snow-covered plains of Montana, a narrow stretch of asphalt flanked by banks of white that rise higher than a car in places. The road cuts through dense forests in some sections, opening abruptly to exposed fields in others. During winter, it is often blanketed in snow, and the air is sharp, cold enough to bite at skin exposed to the wind. The stillness is profound, broken only by the crunch of tires on ice and the occasional howl of wind through the trees. The stillness is profound, broken only by the crunch of tires on ice and the occasional howl of wind through the trees. Shadows appear in the snowbanks beside the road. They seem to move independently of the terrain, shifting with unnatural timing. Drivers first notice them in the headlights, dark forms pacing alongside the vehicle. When the car slows or stops, the shadows do not pause or disappear. Instead, they adjust, moving in sync with the observer's motion, pacing perfectly with the vehicle. Some report the feeling that these forms are aware, deliberately following, their movements deliberate rather than random. The shadows sometimes pause to stare directly through windows. Drivers catch glimpses of them in peripheral vision, fleeting but unnerving. There is no face, no clear form beyond the outline of a body, yet the presence feels conscious. Eyes, if they exist, are indistinct, but the sensation of being watched is palpable. The intensity of the gaze can cause a chill to spread through the car, a coldness that rises beyond the ambient winter air, pressing against skin and nerves alike. Even during the day, strange phenomena persist. Tracks appear in the snow along the roadside where no one walked. Footprints form paths leading to the edge of the forest, circling the vehicle, or vanishing abruptly. Some tracks appear large, others small, as though multiple figures passed in succession or simultaneously. Yet no person or animal is ever visible nearby. Observers report that the tracks look fresh, impressions in the snow that have not been covered by wind or snowfall, as if they were created moments before being discovered. The road itself seems altered by presence. Snow drifts accumulate differently than expected, rising unnaturally along the curves. Corners appear sharper, dips deeper, as though the path itself bends to amplify the sense of unease. Drivers describe a sensation of something traveling in parallel, invisible yet tangible, a presence maintaining pace alongside them. Frostvale Road isolates travelers. The surrounding forest muffles distant sounds. And open fields allow no shelter from the cold or the gaze of the shadows. Occasionally, a faint crunch or shift can be heard just beyond the edge of the headlights, suggesting movement in places where nothing should exist. The snow reflects light strangely, forming distortions that hint at forms out of sync with reality. Some drivers report that the shadows do not simply follow as they anticipate. A sudden swerve to avoid ice or a drift is mirrored instantly by the forms along the roadside. A pause to examine the banks results in shadows turning to match the observer's gaze. Even brief moments of distraction are noticed. The effect is subtle, building an almost imperceptible tension that grows as the journey continues. The road appears longer than maps indicate, its curves drawn out, as if distance itself is warped by the presence of the unseen. The visual phenomena are accompanied by changes in temperature. Even inside the car, cold spots manifest as if the shadows carry a chill with them. The air grows heavier, pressing inward on the vehicle. Breath becomes visible in even moderate temperatures. Fog forms along windows, though the air outside may be clear. Drivers report the sensation of exhalation freezing, the mist clinging unnaturally to the cabin. Night intensifies the experience. Trees on either side become black silhouettes against the sky, blending with the shadows in ways that confuse perception. Sounds of movement become sharper, more immediate. Snow falls silently, yet each flake seems to reflect a shape or presence before dissolving into the ground. The shadows multiply, forming layers along the roadside, creating the impression of many figures watching, tracking, and pacing in rhythm with the observer. Technology often behaves oddly along Frostvale Road. Cameras capture shapes that are not visible to the naked eye. Audio records faint whispers or crunching noises without an identifiable source. Dashcams sometimes fail to register sections of the journey, leaving gaps in footage where the road appears continuous to the driver. These inconsistencies reinforce the sense that the road itself is a space in which perception and reality are not entirely aligned. Drivers who traverse Frostvale Road rarely forget the experience. The pacing shadows, the cold spots, the impossible tracks, and the feeling of being watched leave lasting impressions. Even after leaving, the memory of shapes moving alongside, mirroring every motion, persists. The road remains in mind as a twisting, snow-covered corridor where the ordinary rules of observation and expectation no longer fully apply. Shadows appear in the snowbanks. Figures pace in headlights. They move when the car stops. They pause to stare directly through windows. Tracks appear where no one walked. Frostvale Road stretches endlessly across Montana. A place where observation is constant. Distance is distorted. And the presence of the unseen is undeniable. Travelers carry the memory. Aware that for the length of the road, they were never truly alone. Blackwood Stretch runs through dense forests in Washington, a narrow road lined with towering evergreens that lean close over the asphalt. Their trunks rise straight and thick, casting shadows that blot out the moonlight and swallow the headlights of passing cars. The forest presses in on both sides, creating a corridor where sound behaves differently, carrying and fading in unnatural ways. The air is always cool and damp, thick with the scent of moss and earth. Travelers describe the road as quiet, almost too quiet, with the only movement coming from shadows that should not exist. Shadow figures appear along the shoulders. They are tall, dark, and silent, stepping from the tree line without warning. Their forms are indistinct, sometimes appearing humanoid, sometimes amorphous, shifting at the edges of perception. The figures pace slowly, matching the rhythm of passing vehicles, yet never leaving the shoulder or stepping fully onto the road. Occasionally, they pause, and the headlights illuminate them for just a moment. Some seem to hover slightly above the ground, lifted by something unseen. The effect is subtle but undeniable, giving the impression of weightlessness. Fog often rolls in unexpectedly. It swirls low across the asphalt, clinging to the tires and skirts of cars. When it thickens, the figures in the fog become more distinct yet more surreal. Visibility drops to a few feet, and the forest becomes a wall of darkness beyond the haze. Travelers report that the figures drift above the ground, moving in ways that defy gravity or expectation. They are not bound by the terrain, appearing to float as if suspended by the mist itself. Mirrors reflect anomalies. Drivers often notice that their own reflection appears wrong inside mirrors or the rearview. Limbs may seem elongated, posture altered, or a shadow standing behind them that is not there in reality. Occasionally, the reflection shows the figure in the back seat or on the shoulder, visible only in glass. The trees themselves seem alive. Branches sway without wind. Needles rustle softly, carrying sounds across the road. The shadows under the pines shift independently of the moon or headlights, stretching or twisting at angles that should not be possible. Roots push unevenly against the asphalt, creating the impression of movement beneath the tires. Even the fog seems to respond, thickening when a vehicle slows and thinning when it moves faster. Travelers describe a sensation of being guided, or perhaps herded, through the stretch by forces unseen. Travelers feel watched. Eyes are not visible, but a presence is undeniable. Some describe the feeling of breath against the neck or a pressure in the chest. The forest seems to sense hesitation, growing heavier when someone slows or attempts to stop. Attempting to focus on the figures directly causes them to vanish, yet the awareness of their presence lingers in peripheral vision. Sounds are distorted and amplified. Leaves rustle, branches snap, and distant water trickles through unseen streams. Every small sound seems exaggerated, echoing unnaturally down the road. Vehicles produce faint echoes as though the stretch itself absorbs and returns the vibrations of tires and engines. Travelers report hearing whispers that seem to come from all directions, not words, but tones and syllables that tease the edges of comprehension. Local residents warn against driving the stretch after dark. They speak of vehicles that return with occupants shaken, pale, and uneasy, recounting brief glimpses of figures in mirrors, floating shapes in fog, and a pervasive sense of being followed. Some report sudden dizziness or nausea while traversing the road. Others say that vehicles slow involuntarily, headlights dim, and brakes feel heavier without explanation. Blackwood stretch endures as a corridor of forest, shadow, and fog. Tall trees loom over the road. Shadow figures pace along the shoulders, sometimes hovering above the ground. Fog swirls, transforming the environment and making the familiar strange. Reflections in mirrors reveal anomalies, shapes, and presences that vanish when confronted. The highway stretches endlessly, empty yet alive, responding to movement, hesitation, and observation. Travelers who drive alone feel the forest watching, the shadows pacing, and the fog shifting around them. The stretch has an awareness that is subtle yet undeniable. It stretches forward, a corridor of darkness and mist, and those who pass through know that the road itself holds memory, movement, and a presence beyond what the eye can see. Blackwood stretch waits, patient and unchanging, guiding every step, every turn, every reflection in the night. Stormwatch border stretches along a remote stretch of Alabama highway, flanked by dense forests that close in on either side. The road is narrow, slick with rain after sudden downpours, and punctuated by low-lying hollows that collect water into reflective pools. Travelers know the stretch for its abrupt storms, winds that whip through the trees, and lightning that illuminates the landscape in blinding flashes. Visibility disappears without warning, and the rhythm of rainfall transforms the road into a mirror of shifting shadows and reflections. It is during these storms that the first figures appear. Shadowy silhouettes emerge in the center of the wet asphalt, pacing back and forth with deliberate steps. They are indistinct in the darkness, tall and dark forms that move as if aware of the highway itself. Each flash allows travelers a glimpse of multiple figures, all moving with quiet purpose, yet dissolving into darkness before the next strike. Drivers report the sensation of being tugged, a subtle pressure against the vehicle that shifts the car slightly off course. Steering wheels resist for a moment as though guided by invisible hands. The effect is brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle those who sense a presence beyond the physical. Tires hiss against the wet road as drivers regain control, hearts racing as the shadows continue pacing ahead, reflecting in the windshield or side mirrors. Mirrors and windows hold the most unnerving evidence. Even when the road ahead appears empty, reflections reveal dozens of figures standing just behind or to the sides. They do not move randomly. Their positions are deliberate, forming lines or clusters that correspond to flashes of lightning. When looked at directly, the figures fade from perception, leaving only wet asphalt and dark tree line. Yet in reflections, they remain constant, an unseen reality layered atop the ordinary world. The storms themselves seem to awaken the road. Rain falls unevenly, drumming on the hood and roof with variable rhythm. Wind lashes against the sides of the car, carrying a low hum that blends with the patter of water. Occasionally, a distant clap of thunder is followed not just by light, but by the instant presence of shadow forms on the asphalt. They do not scatter. They do not flee. They step, measure, and pace in synchronization with the sudden brightness, as if the lightning commands attention and the shadows obey. Travelers describe a feeling of being observed even when alone. Eyes seem to track from the figures in reflections. The sensation is not passive. It is deliberate. Pressing against perception, tugging at instincts. Guiding focus. Every curve of the road feels longer. In this state, every line of sight drawn along the horizon. As though the highway itself bends to accommodate the presence. The combination of storm, shadow, and reflection creates. That is difficult to ignore. The surrounding forests contribute to the effect. Leaves and debris move across the road, yet the figures remain unaffected by these natural forces. Rain collects and dips along the asphalt, forming temporary mirrors that multiply the reflections of shadows, creating the illusion of more figures than actually exist. The road becomes a living canvas, reflecting movement, light, and the impression of many presences all at once. Some witnesses have reported hearing footsteps from behind, synchronized with the pacing of the shadows ahead. The sound echoes unnaturally, distant yet close, amplified by the empty air and wet surfaces. It does not correspond with any vehicle or passing object. It is an auditory layer that reinforces the visual impression, a presence that follows, matches, and observes. The combination of reflected figures and echoing steps produces a persistent awareness. That can become overwhelming for anyone who lingers too long on the road during the storm. As storms intensify, the figures multiply in reflections. Lightning flashes reveal endless lines of silhouettes along the highway, all pacing, all frozen momentarily before dissolving into darkness. Windows and mirrors continue to display forms beyond direct line of sight. Even after the storm passes, the road feels different. The asphalt seems slick with memory, the shadows lingering in perception long after sight has ceased. Travelers leave with an imprint of pacing figures, reflected presences, and the sense that the road itself retains awareness of every visitor. Stormwatch Border is more than a highway. It is a convergence of natural power and persistent presence. Lightning reveals forms that walk, pacing in rhythm with flashes. Rain amplifies reflections that multiply and persist in mirrors and windows. Vehicles feel the tug of unseen hands, steering subtly off course. Steps echo in empty air, shadows linger in reflections, and the mind registers observation even in isolation. The stretch endures as a place where the storm awakens unseen figures. Where the highway becomes both path and stage. And where every traveler experiences the careful rhythm of light, shadow, and presence along the wet road. Hollow Creek Road winds through the hills of Tennessee, a narrow stretch of asphalt flanked by dense woods and a creek that runs close to the edge. The water moves silently over rocks and roots, reflecting the canopy above in long, distorted lines. During daylight, the creek appears ordinary, shallow in places and quick over stones, yet travelers describe an unease that begins before the sun sets. Shadows gather near the water's edge, pacing slowly along the bank, just beyond the reach of headlights or the eye's focus. When drivers stop along the road, the water reacts. Ripples appear on the surface, concentric circles that expand outward, though no wind disturbs the trees or the surface of the creek. Some report the ripples rise toward the road, small waves washing over rocks that should remain dry. Observers often describe the water as shifting unnaturally, responding to presence, testing proximity. The creek seems alive, aware of those who pause and watch. Shapes emerge from beneath the water, only to vanish as suddenly as they appear. Silhouettes stretch along the shallow bed, thin and shadowed, moving with a motion that is deliberate yet alien. Observers report glimpsing forms that seem partially human, limbs bending at impossible angles, disappearing before the mind can register them fully. Even when the shapes vanish, the water continues to pulse with small disturbances, as though something remains just beneath the surface, hidden from sight but undeniably present. The road itself twists with the natural contour of the land, curving sharply along hillsides and cutting through dense groves of trees. Fog often forms near the creek in the early morning or late evening, clinging to the road and water in a low, rolling haze. Through the fog, shadows appear to lengthen and shift, moving along the creek bank in tandem with the shapes below. Tires on the asphalt occasionally squeal without cause, brakes untouched, the sound echoing faintly through the hills. Travelers who venture closer to the water report an intensifying sense of observation. The forest around Hollow Creek Road falls silent, the usual sounds of birds or insects replaced by the faintest pulse of movement in the water. Ripples appear more frequently, even when no one moves, and the shadows along the bank seem to step in response to human presence. Some claim that whispering accompanies these disturbances, voices indistinct, repeating names or phrases too soft to decipher, yet unmistakably directed toward those watching. The creek seems to possess its own rhythm. Water laps at the edges of stones, then halts briefly before continuing, as if listening. Shapes beneath the surface sometimes rise in sync with the ripples, forming moments of clarity that suggest awareness. Observers describe the sensation of being measured, a quiet calculation in the movement of the shadows and shapes. It is not hostile, yet it is compelling, demanding attention and vigilance. Hollow Creek Road stretches for miles through the hills, with few places to pull over or pause. Those who do stop often report the creek reacting to the act itself. Small splashes rise from stones in the middle of the channel. dark shapes shift beneath the waterline. Shadows along the bank lean closer, their outlines clearer and more defined than before. The water reflects the sky and trees, yet something deeper moves within, distorting the reflection, bending it into forms that appear briefly before disappearing. Night amplifies the phenomena. The creek becomes darker, almost black, reflecting little but absorbing light. Ripples appear without cause, shapes emerge and vanish, and shadows pace with more urgency. Whispers drift through the trees, incomprehensible yet insistent. Drivers often report feeling an invisible presence riding alongside their vehicles, pressing against the air or the tires. Even when vehicles move, the sense of being observed remains, leaving a lingering tension long after the road has ended. Some who have traveled Hollow Creek Road insist that the creek remembers them. Returning travelers report shapes appearing in the same locations where they stopped before. Ripples forming at precisely the same points. The water seems to hold memory, and the shadows along the bank appear to recognize those who approach. No harm is reported, yet a subtle warning persists. The creek, the shadows, and the shapes beneath the surface operate with a quiet intelligence, aware of all who pass and all who pause. A creek runs beside the road. Shadows appear pacing near the water's edge. When drivers stop, ripples appear in the water though there is no wind. Some say shapes emerge and disappear under the surface. Hollow Creek Road remains, a place where forest, water, and shadow converge. Observing every step, every pause, and every glance into the moving, living darkness of the creek. Dark Pines Highway stretches deep into the forests of Idaho, a narrow ribbon of asphalt flanked by towering pines that block most of the sky. The trees rise straight and silent, their trunks thick and unyielding, casting long, dark shadows across the road. Casting long, dark shadows across the road. The air carries the scent of pine resin and damp earth, heavy with stillness. The air carries the scent of pine resin and damp earth, heavy with stillness. Shadows appear at random intervals. They flicker along the edges of the road, merging with the darkness of the forest. Some stretch across the asphalt like spilled ink. Others cling to the trunks, coiling around roots and branches. Drivers often report seeing these shapes shift in ways that defy the movement of wind or light. They vanish when observed directly, only to reappear moments later further along the road, maintaining presence without form. Visitors have reported hearing branches crack behind them in time with footsteps. The sound is subtle at first, almost drowned out by the engine or the hum of tires. Then it grows distinct, synchronized with their own steps or movements along the highway. Each crack resonates sharply in the still air, echoing off the pines, giving the impression that some Ania or some Thinga follows, pacing behind. Yet when checked, no figure is visible. The forest remains motionless, silent, except for the faint rustle of needles. Sometimes the figures appear behind the windshield, reflected in glass. The image is never clear, more like a shadowed outline than a form. They stand just beyond the interior of the car, their presence visible only as a distortion in reflection. Blink, and the figure disappears, leaving only the driver's own image and the dim interior lighting. The effect is unsettling, creating a sense that the vehicle is not entirely alone as it moves through the trees. The road narrows between dense clusters of pines. Roots rise along the edges of the asphalt, cracking the surface in places. Fallen branches litter the roadside, some partially obscured by low-hanging needles. The canopy above sways with subtle motion, although the air remains still. Light flickers through the branches, creating shifting patterns on the ground that mimic movement. Drivers and passengers report that these patterns often seem to converge with the shadows in the peripheral vision. Dark Pines Highway is silent, yet alive with subtle signals. The whisper of wind through the trees is uneven, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, carrying the faint smell of damp earth. Small animals rarely cross the road after dusk, leaving the environment devoid of ordinary motion. The highway feels enclosed, bordered not only by trees but by the sense of observation, of attention from unseen presences. Footsteps, shadows, and reflections interact in ways that suggest awareness. A branch cracks in one spot just as a tire passes over a rut. An echo mirrored by a shadow stretching along the edge of the asphalt. The windshield reflects a figure at the same moment, creating a layered perception of space and presence. Those who pause on the road report the sensation intensifying, a weight pressing slightly along the back of the seat, a shiver running along the neck and shoulders. Even during daylight, the highway retains an unsettling quality. Shadows remain deep beneath the trees, and the shifting light creates illusions of movement. The scent of pine and earth is stronger. And the occasional reflection in mirrors or glass seems more distinct. Shapes flicker in the corner of vision, disappearing whenever they are focused on, leaving a lingering sense of presence that cannot be ignored. Travelers describe the road as a corridor. The canopy arches overhead like a tunnel of trees, enclosing the asphalt in shadow and scent. Every curve and bend changes the play of light and shadow, making familiar markers appear altered. The same shadow may appear to leap from one side to the other, maintaining proximity to the vehicle. Branches sometimes crack in tandem with the driver's heartbeat, creating a rhythm of awareness that feels intentional. At intersections or turnoffs along the highway, the presence often lingers. Shadows bend along the trees. Footsteps echo faintly in the undergrowth. And the reflections in glass remain briefly, as though reluctant to leave. Dark Pines Highway is a place where perception bends. Tall pines block most of the sky. Shadows appear at random intervals. Visitors have reported hearing branches crack behind them in time with footsteps. Sometimes the figures appear behind the windshield, reflected in glass. Those who drive it feel that the highway itself is aware, that it watches, and that the shadows linger in tandem with each movement along its narrow, twisting asphalt. The road stretches on through dense forest, its surface shadowed and still. Branches sway without wind, shadows bend in impossible ways, and reflections emerge where no one stands. Dark Pines Highway waits silently, a corridor of shadow and perception, carrying every traveler through a space where reality and unseen presence intersect in ways that cannot be explained but are undeniably felt. Broken Line Road stretches through the rolling hills of Kentucky, a narrow asphalt ribbon flanked by overgrown grass and dense woodlands. Once a thoroughfare connecting small towns, it was abandoned after a series of accidents that left the road notorious among locals. Cracks run along its surface, weeds push through the edges, and faded signage warns of sharp curves and hidden hazards. Even in daylight, the road feels unusually quiet, the surrounding forest pressing inward, isolating anyone who drives along its path. Shadows pace along the shoulder. Do not move like deer or other wildlife. They gather in groups, lingering near the edges of the asphalt. Just beyond the range of headlights at night. Drivers report seeing them simultaneously on both sides of the road, mirroring one another in stride and timing. The shapes are dark, humanoid in outline but featureless, devoid of distinguishing details. They move deliberately, pacing back and forth, sometimes stopping to glance toward vehicles before resuming their rhythm. The road itself seems to react to presence. Curves appear sharper, hills steeper, and stretches of asphalt longer than maps indicate. Drivers often experience a sensation of pressure in the cabin, as though the space inside the car has been partially filled by unseen occupants. Even when alone, travelers feel eyes upon them, watching, assessing. The presence is subtle at first, a chill along the neck, a weight across the shoulders, growing more pronounced the longer the vehicle remains on the road. At night, the effect intensifies. Headlights illuminate the pacing shadows, yet the shapes do not behave like typical figures. They mirror speed, direction, and timing perfectly. If the vehicle slows, they slow. If the car pauses, the figures adjust to maintain a presence alongside, shifting slightly as though conscious of every movement. Occasionally, shadows appear to emerge from the forest floor itself, stepping onto the road from the edge of the tree line, only to retreat silently when approached. Sound behaves strangely along Broken Line Road. The tires on asphalt produce echoes that linger longer than expected. Wind through trees carries whispers that seem almost human, indecipherable and fleeting. Leaves and branches move despite still air, creating the impression of movement beyond the visible figures. Every rustle, every creak, and even the hum of the engine feels amplified, reinforcing the awareness that the road is not merely empty asphalt, but a space occupied by forces unseen. Travelers describe the feeling of being accompanied inside the vehicle. Seats and empty spaces seem charged, as if invisible passengers are present. Sometimes the sensation is fleeting, a brief pressure at the back or the side. Other times it is more persistent, pressing down as if multiple presences occupy the cabin without visual confirmation. The experience grows with speed and distance. The longer one remains on the road, the heavier the sense of observation, the more tangible the unseen company becomes. The shadows themselves appear selective. Not every driver witnesses them. Those who have are often drawn to explore the road deliberately, despite its reputation. The experience can be cumulative. Initial sightings are subtle, a flicker at the tree line, a hint of movement in the corner of the eye. Continued observation brings larger groups, more coordinated pacing, and the sensation of a road alive with awareness. The shapes are never aggressive, but their presence is inescapable, insistent. Even in daylight, anomalies occur. Drivers note footprints along the shoulder where no one could have walked. Tracks appear and vanish without explanation, sometimes matching the pace of the vehicle as if recorded and replayed. Shadows are less defined, blending into the brush, but the feeling of being watched persists. Air seems colder, the forest darker, edges sharper. The road reacts to movement, responding not to physical obstacles, but to those who traverse it. Those who attempt to document the road with cameras or dashcams often encounter technical anomalies. Shadows appear in frames inconsistently, moving across asphalt where the road appears empty to the naked eye. Audio may capture soft footsteps, whispers, or rustling leaves absent from direct observation. Some footage shows fleeting figures at the edges of headlights, disappearing when the camera focuses. The phenomena do not always reproduce reliably, leaving a sense that Broken Line Road interacts differently with perception than with reality. The road is long, winding, and deceptive. Curves conceal stretches of black asphalt. Hills hide what lies beyond. And the forest presses close enough to feel like a tunnel. Shadows continue their pacing alongside. The sense of invisible passengers persists. And the air carries the chill of presence. Drivers who pass through leave with the memory of movement just beyond comprehension. A feeling of observation that cannot be fully shaken. And the persistent sensation that every step, turn, and pause is tracked. Broken Line Road is more than an abandoned route. It is a corridor of awareness. A stretch of pavement where shadows pace the shoulders. In perfect timing. Where the forest presses inward. And where unseen passengers occupy the spaces inside the car. Drivers feel watched. The road bends perception. Footsteps appear where no one walked. Figures mirror movement perfectly. And every traveler who enters carries the memory. Knowing that along this twisting path in Kentucky, they were never truly alone. Whispering Hollow Lane stretches through the arid expanse of New Mexico, a narrow road cutting across sand and scrub under the vast desert sky. By day, it seems ordinary, sun-baked and still, lined with cacti, scattered rocks, and the occasional desert shrub. By night, the lane transforms. Shadows step from the desert edges. They emerge fluidly, moving along the sides of the road with a deliberate, pacing rhythm. Tall and dark, their shapes are difficult to define. Limbs stretch and bend in ways that appear natural at first glance, yet somehow impossible when observed closely. The shadows do not stumble, do not falter. They pace along the shoulder, maintaining presence without haste, always returning to the same stretch of road. Their movement is hypnotic, drawing the eye, compelling attention, yet impossible to touch or fully confront. Travelers hear voices call their names softly. The whispers drift from the darkness, intimate and persistent, carried by the desert wind. They are not loud, not demanding, but deliberate, filling the space around vehicles and travelers alike. The tone is personal, familiar, as if someone has been waiting just for the listener. The words are fleeting, fading as soon as the mind attempts to comprehend them fully. No source is visible, no figure approaches directly. The sound lingers after the figures vanish. And it lingers after the figures vanish. Drivers or pedestrians attempting to reach the shadows report sudden disappearance. One moment, the shapes are defined and pacing just beyond the headlights. The next, they dissolve into the desert, leaving only sand, cacti, and darkness in their place. The effect is disorienting. Those who pause, shaken by the disappearance, often feel an invisible pull compelling them to continue moving. The shadows return inevitably, resuming the pacing in the same rhythm, reminding travelers that the road itself is alive with unseen motion. The lane seems longer at night. Distances stretch unnaturally, the edges of the road fading into nothing. The desert feels broader, the horizon receding farther than daylight allows. Headlights reflect faintly off the sand, illuminating nothing more than shifting darkness. Occasionally, travelers glimpse a figure reflected in a mirror or the rear view, standing behind them or pacing alongside the vehicle, visible for only a moment before fading. The reflection never aligns with reality, leaving a lasting impression of presence without form. The desert air carries an oppressive quiet. Wind rustles the sparse brush, soft and whispering. Sand shifts beneath tires or feet, but no pattern follows. Even the cacti seem to lean toward the road, creating the sense of being watched. The air is cooler than expected, settling heavy against skin. Each footstep, each engine hum, is amplified against the silence. Travelers report heartbeats quickening, hands tightening on the wheel, as though the desert itself is attuned to fear and attention. Patterns emerge along the road. The shadows pace in repetition, pausing at intervals as if counting or measuring. The whispers repeat phrases, soft and distant, yet personalized. Travelers who glance quickly to the edges of the lane notice a subtle choreography in the movement of figures, the way they drift and shift. The pattern is fluid, adapting to observers without ever breaking, maintaining presence, and creating tension that persists along the stretch of road. Some report sensory distortions. The desert seems to pulse. Headlights stretch along the asphalt, appearing longer than they should. The road bends slightly in perception, curving at impossible angles. The mirrors reflect figures that are taller or closer than reality allows. Sound becomes distorted. A cough or whisper carries unusually far. The air seems thickened, heavy to inhale, filling the chest with subtle pressure. Those who pause feel dizziness or disorientation, a gentle but persistent tug compelling motion, encouraging continuation along the lane. Locals warn against traveling the lane after dark. They speak of travelers returning shaken, describing movement and sound that cannot be explained. Vehicles come back with nothing mechanically wrong, yet occupants report shadows stepping along the roadside, floating slightly above the ground, and whispers calling their names. Some claim that attempts to photograph or film the figures fail, the shapes appearing in frames distorted or missing entirely. The lane has a reputation for testing awareness, presence, and courage. Whispering Hollow Lane endures, a stretch of asphalt cutting through desert scrub, a corridor of shadows and unseen motion. Tall, dark figures emerge along the shoulders, pacing fluidly. They vanish when approached, yet always return. Voices whisper names softly from the darkness. Mirrors reveal reflections that do not align with reality. The air carries weight, the desert stretches unnaturally. And the fog of uncertainty presses against travelers' senses. Vehicles pass, headlights cutting narrow paths. Yet the shadows continue their rhythm, the whispers persist. And the desert watches. Those who drive alone feel the pull of the lane, the pacing figures, and the intimate sound of names carried on the wind. The road stretches endlessly, alive with presence, and anyone who travels it at night experiences the uncanny awareness of being observed by something beyond sight. Whispering Hollow Lane waits patiently, moving silently, and always returns. Vale Creek border winds through a quiet stretch of Illinois countryside, a narrow road flanked by trees that lean close to the asphalt. Alongside it, the creek runs sluggish and dark, often obscured by fog that rolls in low and thick. But as dusk approaches or mist rises from the creek, the atmosphere changes. The fog thickens and stretches across the road, swallowing light and softening edges. Shapes begin to form in the haze. Shadow figures emerge between the trees along the creek. At first, they appear as shifting darkness, blending with the fog. But as drivers approach, the shapes take on more defined forms, tall and humanoid. Pacing slowly along the tree line. Multiple figures appear at once, spaced unevenly. Their pacing synchronized as though following an invisible measure. When one disappears into the fog, it may reappear behind a vehicle, visible only in mirrors. Drivers report the unsettling sensation of glancing at the rear view to find a figure there, though nothing could have traveled that distance unseen. Mirrors and side windows reveal forms that seem impossible, overlapping and multiplying. The road may be empty in front, yet reflections show a procession of dark figures keeping pace, always attentive to the traveller's movement. Some who walk the roadside describe hearing a steady heartbeat, slow and deep, in time with the steps of the figures. The sound is not mechanical or environmental. Each step in the fog seems to carry weight, a pulse of presence that follows along the creek, pressing awareness into anyone who ventures near. The combination of sight, reflection, and sound creates a layered experience, disorienting and mesmerizing. The fog itself reacts to movement. As vehicles pass, it shifts and swirls, forming patterns that hint at figures beyond the line of sight. Shadows elongate across the road, stretching toward headlights, only to retreat when observed directly. The mist hangs close to the asphalt, distorting familiar shapes and bending perception. It creates an environment in which the figures appear simultaneously near and far, ahead and behind, visible yet intangible. The trees along the creek contribute to the effect. Their branches sway with the wind, but occasionally, branches bend in ways that do not match gusts. Shadows ripple across the road in time with the figures' steps, creating the illusion of movement in areas without fog. Fallen leaves shift with no breeze, aligning into subtle patterns that guide attention toward the tree line where the shadows pace. The environment itself seems aware, amplifying presence and heightening perception. Drivers who linger too long report a creeping disorientation. Distance becomes difficult to judge. Shadows appear closer than they should, reflections multiply beyond logical explanation. And the steady heartbeat persists, growing louder or softer as if responding to attention. The fog thickens, masking the road ahead while emphasizing the figures along the creek. Every glance at mirrors or windows reinforces the sense of multiple presences following, pacing, observing. Travelers on foot notice similar effects. The fog clings to skin and clothing, damp and cold. Footsteps echo in patterns that do not correspond with reality, and the sound of water from the creek blends with a low rhythmic pulse. The figures in the fog sometimes step aside, disappear, or merge into other forms, only to reappear moments later. Whispered noises are sometimes heard among the rustling leaves, fragmented and fleeting, adding to the sensation that the forest and fog themselves are alive with attention. Some who have passed through Vale Creek border at night describe an almost hypnotic effect. Eyes are drawn toward the shadows, mirrors, and mist. The heartbeat grows steady, syncing with steps, the mind becoming aware of rhythm and presence. Even after leaving the road, travelers report feeling the pulse in memory, a lingering pressure at the edge of perception. The sense that the fog, the creek, and the shadow figures continue to watch from a distance. Vale Creek border endures as a place where the ordinary landscape transforms under fog and night. Shadow figures pace between trees, visible and reflected. Mirrors and windows reveal multiple forms, appearing and disappearing in impossible patterns. Travelers experience a heightened awareness of presence, observation, and rhythm. The creek winds silently alongside the road. The stretch of highway carries both warning and fascination, a place where fog, reflection, and shadows converge, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who travels its length after dark. The road that never ends appears without warning, stretching across remote locations that cannot be found on any map. Travelers describe approaching a stretch of asphalt that seems familiar yet alien, a road that emerges from the wilderness or desert with no discernible entry or exit. The pavement is dark and smooth, edges fading into darkness, flanked by trees, scrub, or barren terrain depending on location. The horizon offers no relief. The road seems to continue beyond sight, bending and straightening in ways that defy memory and expectation. Shadow figures pace along the roadside. They are thin, tall, indistinct, always just beyond the edge of vision. Observers report seeing them in multiple places at once, stepping in rhythm along parallel stretches of asphalt. They do not speak, do not move with wind or weather. They are persistent and patient, walking endlessly as if marking the path for anyone who ventures onto the road. Some travelers notice them in mirrors, dozens of glowing eyes reflecting back from the shadows, multiplied in rearview glass. The sensation is overwhelming, as if the road itself is alive, aware, and observing every movement. Drivers report the road stretches farther than any headlights can illuminate. No matter the brightness or range, the end never appears. The figures continue to pace, moving forward in time with the driver, yet never overtaking or disappearing. Some say it feels like being trapped in a loop, a cycle where distance has no meaning. Even when slowing, stopping, or turning around, the road stretches behind in exactly the same way it stretched ahead. Those who pause experience more than visual phenomena. Some feel hands brushing against their shoulders, cold, soft, and fleeting, as though an invisible presence walks just behind or beside them. Others hear whispers along the edges of the asphalt, faint and unintelligible, repeating the cadence of footsteps that do not match their own. The forest, desert, or scrub along the roadside grows unnaturally quiet when the road is approached. No birds sing, no wind rustles. Only the distant hum of asphalt and shadow remains. The air around the road carries a subtle heaviness. Time seems altered. Travelers describe clocks running slower, engines revving differently. Even reflections in mirrors that do not align perfectly with reality. The road is both tangible and impossible. Street lines appear and vanish, guardrails emerge and collapse without notice. Drivers report that familiar gestures, like steering curves or braking, have delayed effects. As though the road anticipates movement and adjusts in response. Shadow figures respond to presence. They pace in parallel to the vehicle, sometimes stepping closer, moving to the edges of headlights, then retreating just beyond vision. Observers report shapes that emerge in mirrors behind them, in spaces that should be empty. Occasionally, one figure is briefly illuminated in the headlights, tall and indistinct, yet when the driver glances again, it has disappeared. The repetition and persistence create unease, a feeling of being tracked by a presence that exists beyond normal perception. Travelers who attempt to leave the road often find themselves back on it despite turning around or taking side paths. The road curves unexpectedly, folds over itself, or intersects with terrain in impossible ways. Those who stop entirely, park, or step from the vehicle notice that the figures approach silently. Shadows stretching, eyes appearing at windows and mirrors. No interaction occurs beyond observation, yet the sensation of threat or urgency remains palpable. Some leave vehicles behind, walking alongside the road, only to find the path behind them reconstructed exactly as it was ahead. A sense of impending doom and madness. Night amplifies the phenomenon. Headlights illuminate only a narrow corridor ahead, the shadows along the roadside sharper, eyes reflecting brighter. The whispering intensifies, synchronized with footsteps or tire movement. The air grows colder, heavy with a presence that is palpable. Travelers describe the sensation of being watched from all directions at once, not just from the roadside but from the pavement itself. The road stretches endlessly into darkness, each turn revealing more asphalt, more figures, more eyes. Those who follow the road for extended distances report lasting effects. Perception changes, time feels fractured. And memory of the surrounding terrain becomes unreliable. Some describe feelings of déjà vu. Seeing the same curve, the same shadow, the same line of asphalt repeated endlessly. Returning to the road later is impossible. Leaving only memory and the lingering weight of experience. Those who exit report that they are not the same. The road imprints itself on awareness, altering perception, caution, and understanding of distance. Some never return at all, leaving only vehicles abandoned in the darkness for others to encounter. This stretch appears in remote locations with no map. Shadow figures pace endlessly. Headlights reflect dozens of eyes in the mirrors. Some who stop feel hands brush their shoulders. Some who stop feel hands brush their shoulders. The road stretches forever. The road stretches forever. The figures wait. The figures wait. The headlights can never reach the end. The headlights can never reach the end. Those who follow its path never return the same. Those who follow its path never return the same. Some never return at all. Some never return at all. The road that never ends exists as both path and presence, infinite and observing, waiting for travelers who stray too far into the unknown. Thank you, my friend, for traveling these haunted border roads with me tonight. Roads are supposed to lead somewhere, but these roads are liminal. They are thresholds, watching the living from the shadows. They remember the lost. They mimic our movements. They follow. If you ever drive down an empty road at night and feel eyes in your mirrors, or shadows pacing beside you, or footsteps echoing in sync with your heartbeat, do not stop. Keep driving. The shadows are patient. They have always been waiting. Before we part tonight, tell me. Thank you, my friend, for traveling these haunted border roads with me tonight. Would you dare drive down a haunted border road with figures pacing beside you? Or would you turn away and hope they forget your presence? Rest now. Until our next haunted journey.